His fingers brushed mine, reaching for the same mango, and suddenly Thailand felt like home. I'd been wandering the Saturday night bazaar for what felt like hours, completely and utterly lost in the most wonderful way possible. The maze of stalls stretched endlessly in every direction, filled with everything from hand-woven textiles to carved wooden elephants to street food that smelled like heaven but looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. Cayman had dropped me off at Malay's that morning after our planned city tour, which had been simultaneously the best and most torturous 8 hours of my life. Best because he'd shown me temples that took my breath away, fed me the most incredible cow soy I'd ever tasted, and made me laugh until my sides hurt with his stories about clueless tourists. Torturous because every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment when he'd lean close to point something out had left me more confused about my own reactions than before. Go to night market tonight, he'd suggested as I climbed out of his truck. Saturday is best night. Just follow the crowds, you can't miss it. What he hadn't mentioned was that following crowds was easy. Finding your way back out again? Not so much. I'd been photographing a particularly intricate silver bracelet when I'd looked up to realize I had absolutely no idea which direction I'd come from. The narrow aisles all looked identical in the golden glow of hanging lanterns, and the cheerful chaos of vendors calling out in Thai and broken English wasn't exactly helping my navigation skills. That's when I spotted the fruit vendor. More specifically, that's when I spotted the most perfect mango I'd ever seen, golden and fragrant and calling my name from a neat pyramid display. I'd eaten approximately 17 new fruits since arriving in Thailand 12 hours ago, but somehow I was still hungry, still curious, still wanting to try everything this incredible country had to offer. I reached for the mango at the exact same moment someone else did. The electric shock that ran up my arm when our fingers touched had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with the fact that those fingers belonged to Cayman. Ryan. His surprised smile was even more devastating in the warm lantern light than it had been in his truck that morning. What are you doing here? Getting hopelessly lost, apparently, I said, trying to ignore the way my heart was doing gymnastics just from seeing him again. And failing at fruit selection, clearly. He laughed, that same warm sound that had been haunting me all day, and gestured to the vendor. They had a rapid exchange in Thai that ended with the older woman beaming and pressing 2 perfect mangoes into our hands. She says we both have good taste, Cayman translated. The mangoes and... He paused, and I could have sworn I saw a faint blush cross his cheeks in the lantern light. Well, just the mangoes. Just the mangoes. Right. Lucky coincidence running into you, I said, accepting the fruit and trying not to think about how his fingers had felt against mine. Warm. Gentle. Electric. Not really coincidence, he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. I come here most Saturday nights. Help my friend Emma with her stall, grab dinner, people watch. It's... He shrugged. Home, I guess. Emma? British girl, sells handmade jewelry. Been in Chiang Mai about 6 months now. You'd like her, she's loud and opinions about everything. His grin was fond. Fair warning, if she spots you she'll want to adopt you immediately. As if summoned by his words, a cheerful voice cut through the market noise. Cayman. There you are. I was beginning to think you'd been kidnapped by tourists again. The woman who emerged from the crowd was exactly what I'd expected from Cayman's description. Petite, blonde, practically vibrating with energy, and wearing what looked like half her jewelry inventory. Her eyes locked onto me immediately. And who, she said with a grin that suggested trouble, is this gorgeous specimen? I felt heat creep up my neck. Ryan Mitchell. Emma Patterson, she said, extending a hand adorned with at least 7 silver rings. Professional wanderer, amateur jewelry maker, and Cayman's self-appointed social coordinator. She looked between us with unconcealed interest. How do you two know each other? Ryan's staying at Malay's, Cayman explained quickly. I showed him around the city today. Did you now? Emma's grin widened impossibly. And how did that go? The question seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone made me suspect there were layers to it I wasn't picking up on. Cayman shot her a look that was pure warning. It was great, I said honestly. Cayman's an amazing guide. Really knows his stuff. Oh, he definitely knows his stuff, Emma agreed, and now I was certain I was missing something. Well, since you're here you absolutely must try Jin's pad thai. Best in the market. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Before I could protest, she was linking her arms through both of ours and steering us deeper into the maze of stalls. Jin's been feeding night market wanderers for 20 years. Speaks about 6 words of English but cooks like an angel. The food stall she led us to was everything she'd promised. A tiny space with plastic stools and a cook who greeted Cayman like family and Emma like a favorite niece. Jean took one look at me and launched into rapid Thai with Cayman while pointing emphatically at his wok. He wants to know how spicy you can handle, Cayman translated. Fair warning, Thai spicy and Western spicy are very different concepts. I can handle spicy, I said, which made both Emma and Cayman exchange knowing looks. Famous last words, Emma murmured. 20 minutes later, I was proven both right and catastrophically wrong. The pad thai was incredible, complex, aromatic, perfectly balanced between sweet and sour and salty. It was also approximately the temperature of molten lava. Water, I gasped after the first bite, eyes streaming. Please tell me someone has water. Emma was practically falling off her plastic stool with laughter. I tried to warn you. Cayman, to his credit, was already flagging down a vendor for coconut water while trying to hide his own amusement. Jean is very proud of his spice levels, he said, pressing the cold drink into my hands. But you're handling it better than most Farang. Most Farang probably have functioning taste buds. I wheezed, but I kept eating. Partly because it really was delicious, and partly because the concerned way Cayman kept checking on me was doing things to my chest that had nothing to do with spice levels. So, Emma said once I'd recovered enough to form coherent sentences, what brings you to Thailand, Ryan? Gap year? Spiritual journey? Running from something? Emma, Cayman warned. What? I'm making conversation. She turned back to me with unrepentant curiosity. Seriously though, you don't look like the typical backpacker crowd. Recently unemployed marketing associate having what might generously be called a quarter-life crisis, I admitted. Figured I'd either find myself in Southeast Asia or at least get some good photos out of the attempt. Photographer? Cayman asked, and I thought I heard genuine interest in his voice. Amateur. Very amateur. I pulled out my camera, scrolling through the shots I'd taken that day. Nothing professional, just, I don't know. I like capturing moments, I guess. Cayman leaned closer to see the small screen, and suddenly he was close enough that I could smell his cologne, something warm and woody that made me want to lean even closer. His shoulder brushed mine as he scrolled through the images, and I had to concentrate very hard on breathing normally. These are good, he said softly. Really good. You have an eye for this. The photos were mostly of the places he'd shown me, Wat Phra Sing's golden spires, the intricate wood carvings at Wat Chedi Luang, candid shots of monks going about their daily routines. But there were others too. A few shots of Cayman that I'd taken when he wasn't looking, caught in profile as he pointed out architectural details or laughing at something I'd said. I watched his expression as he found those photos, saw something flicker across his face that I couldn't quite read. You're a good subject, I said quietly, then immediately wanted to die of embarrassment. Way to sound creepy, Ryan. But Cayman just smiled, soft and a little shy. Maybe you can take more sometime. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I was starting to recognize but didn't quite dare name. Emma cleared her throat loudly. Right then, she announced. I'm going to get more drinks and give you two a moment to work through whatever this is. She gestured vaguely between us. Cayman, stop looking like a deer in headlights. Ryan, stop being so American about everything. I'll be back in 10 minutes. She disappeared into the crowd before either of us could protest, leaving us alone at the tiny plastic table with the remains of our dinner and a sudden awkwardness that hadn't been there moments before. Sorry about Emma, Cayman said after a beat. She's direct. I like direct, I said honestly. And she seems to care about you a lot. She does. Sometimes too much. He was fiddling with his napkin, not quite meeting my eyes. She thinks she knows what's good for me better than I do. Does she? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and Cayman looked up sharply. For a moment, our eyes held, and I felt that same electric current that had sparked when our hands touched over the mango. Maybe, he said quietly. I'm starting to think maybe she does. I had no idea what to say to that. The smart thing would probably be to change the subject, make some joke about the food or ask about the next stall we should visit. The safe thing. Instead, I heard myself asking, what does she think is good for you? Cayman's smile was rueful. Taking chances. Being brave. Not letting fear make decisions for me. Fear of what? Complicated things, he said, which wasn't really an answer but felt like the most honest thing anyone had said to me in months. Things that might not work out. Things that might change everything. The way he was looking at me when he said it made my breath catch. Like maybe I was one of those complicated things. Like maybe that wasn't entirely unwelcome. Emma chose that moment to return, arms full of fresh coconut water and a knowing expression that suggested she'd been watching from a distance. Well, she announced, settling back onto her stool. That looked intense. Should I come back later, or are we past the mysterious brooding phase? Emma, Cayman groaned. What? I'm invested now. She turned to me with bright interest. So, Ryan, how long are you staying in Chiang Mai? A month, I said. Maybe longer, depending on how things go. Things like what? I glanced at Cayman, who was suddenly very interested in his coconut water. Photography project. Seeing the sights. The usual tourist stuff. Emma's expression suggested she wasn't buying it for a second. And will our lovely Cayman be showing you these sights? I looked at Cayman again. I mean, if he wants to. If he has time. I have time, Cayman said quickly. If you want. I know the city pretty well. Good spots for photos and everything. I'd like that, I said, and the smile he gave me could have powered the entire night market. Emma looked between us like she'd just solved a particularly satisfying puzzle. Excellent. Well then, I suppose I should probably mention that there's a lantern festival next weekend. Small one, not the big Yiping festival, but still beautiful. Very photogenic. Really? I felt excitement spark in my chest. I'd read about the lantern festivals, seen the pictures online, but the idea of experiencing one in person. I could take you, Cayman offered, then seemed to realize how that sounded. Show you where to go. Best viewing spots and everything. That would be amazing. We spent another hour wandering the market together, Emma regaling us with stories of her jewelry-making adventures while Cayman pointed out hidden gems tucked away in quiet corners. I took more photos, the three of us squeezed together for a selfie at Emma's insistence, candid shots of market life, more pictures of Cayman when he wasn't looking because I was apparently developing a problem. By the time we parted ways, my memory card was full, my stomach was pleasantly full of new flavors, and my head was spinning with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider 24 hours ago. I'll pick you up tomorrow? Cayman asked as we reached the edge of the market where the crowds thinned out. Show you some of the temples outside the city? I'd love that. Emma had already disappeared back into the maze of stalls, but not before extracting promises from both of us to visit her jewelry stall again soon. As Cayman and I stood at the corner where we'd part ways, him to his apartment, me back to Malay's, the night felt full of unspoken possibilities. Thank you, I said. For tonight, for today, for everything. Thank you for letting me show you around, he replied. It's nice seeing the city through fresh eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. The night air was warm and fragrant with jasmine and street food, the distant sound of temple bells mixing with market chatter. Cayman was standing close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that it would take almost nothing to lean forward, to close the distance between us, to find out if his lips were as soft as they looked. Don't, my rational brain warned. You've known him for 36 hours. You're not even sure what this is. Don't ruin it by moving too fast. I should probably head back, I said instead, stepping back before I could do something stupid. If Cayman was disappointed, he hid it well. Of course. Long day tomorrow. I'd made it about 3 steps when he called my name. Ryan. I turned back. I'm glad you came to Thailand, he said softly. Me too, I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. Walking back to Malay's through the quiet streets, I found myself replaying every moment of the evening. The way Cayman had looked at my photos. How he'd leaned close enough for me to count his eyelashes. The electricity that seemed to spark every time we touched, even accidentally. Taking chances, Emma had said. Being brave. Not letting fear make decisions. Maybe it was time I started taking my own advice.